Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm your host, Liz Lang. Each week on this podcast, we will break down various aspects of mental health. We are so excited you're here and hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hey guys, Liz Lang here with Jeremiah and Selina from Core Connection. And this week we are going to get into influence and support of grandparents and other adults. And before we do that, I have this week's parenting moment, which again is actually my parents' parenting moment, particularly my dad's parenting moment. But again, it's one of those things that I look back on my childhood and I really, really appreciate. So for many years, my dad was a long haul truck driver, and he would take, over the summers, he would take each of us kids on a trip with him. And I really wanted to go on a trip with him to California because at the time we had a lot of family living in California that I didn't get to see very often. And so it finally worked out for me to do a trip to California in the summer, and I was so excited. And this was the summer after I turned 12 years old. So you could probably guess where this is going. I am out on a job with my dad and I get my first period. And I start panicking. I am like, what do I do? There are no women around. What is my dad going to do? He's going to freak out. He's not going to know how to handle this. He's just going to panic. And so I'm like, Dad, can I call Mom? And he's like, well, she's not going to be able to do anything for you. What do you need? And I'm like, well, can I call Grandma? No, she's working. What do you need? And so finally I just tell him and he goes, okay, we'll get you what you need. And that was it. And the older I've gotten, the more and more I've appreciated that he handled it. He was calm, collected. It didn't bother him at all. He wasn't freaked out. He wasn't panicked. He just said, okay, we'll do it. He was perfectly comfortable. And as I got older and I started dating, that became my standard. Is I expect that men should be able to handle and be mature enough to handle that kind of a thing. Now, that doesn't extend to knowing exactly what product to buy at the store, okay? That's a bit unreasonable because there are so many varieties and so many options. But if your daughter needs these products, or if a woman that you're with needs to go buy pads and tampons or feminine hygiene products, be mature enough to be able to handle it. Be comfortable going through the checkout line and not, turning 50 shades of red because you're embarrassed buying products that are just a part of life. So that's my parenting moment to men in general, especially dads with daughters. Be prepared for it and be comfortable with it.
Because it's going to happen.
Uh-huh.
It's going to be a part of life. It's okay.
Yep. My mom felt terrible that she wasn't there. She was like, I'm so sorry I'm not there. And I'm like, yeah, me too. But again, my dad was great and I've appreciated it. And I appreciate that Curtis, he's always handled it very well.
Very good. Thanks for sharing, Liz.
Yeah. Okay. So how other adults shape a teen's confidence and character. We allow a lot of wonderful people in our child's lives, and it's a fantastic thing. And so I want to start this episode just a little bit differently because several weeks ago, we did an episode on setting boundaries with other adults in your child's life. And one of the things that we mentioned was stepdads. And so statistically, when there are instances of abuse, it is more likely to happen with stepdads. But just because it's statistically likely doesn't mean it's going to. And I've always wanted to kind of go back and kind of just say that, like, there are so many wonderful, great stepdads and step parents in general that are just amazing. I mean, I have to give a shout out to Curtis's stepdad, who we love. He's a big part of our life. He has a huge influence on our kids, and we absolutely love him. And he's just a fantastic, great guy. And the same thing with, she's not technically Curtis's stepmom, but, his dad has been dating a woman for a couple of years and they live together now. And so she's very much a part of the family. And so there's a lot of really wonderful step parents out there. And I just want to acknowledge them and the important work that they do and how much positive influence they can and often do have in the lives of children.
Yeah, I appreciate you clarifying that for us, Liz, because the last thing I want our listeners to do is go, I'm going to get remarried to this guy, and I can't do it because he's going to abuse my children. That's not necessarily the case. Yes, we understand what the statistics look like. And just like Liz has shared, like, man, there's an absolute ton of wonderful step parents that exist in the world that have done some great and amazing things. And hopefully we didn't discount those individuals in that episode that we did, because that wasn't our intention. So if we did, and you were hurt by that, we apologize. That wasn't our intention.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here's a question for our listeners to ponder for a second. Have you ever noticed your teen opens up more easily to a grandparent, coach, or teacher more than you? Why do teens do that? It can feel so obnoxious. You can preach something at your kid until you are blue in the face, and they don't accept it until grandma says it. And you're like, what am I, chopped liver over here?
Well, the joke in our house that I always share is, why do grandparents and grandchildren get along so well? Well, it's because they share a common enemy, right? And so, and yes, that's funny and meant to be funny, but the reality is that it's a different relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that influence can be a little bit different, and it's a wonderful thing. And I worry a little bit about society today. There's this trend of cutting parents off because they don't parent the way we do,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. And I think it's awful. I think it's a terrible decision to make on 1,000 different levels. The influence of grandparents in a child's life, it can be tremendous. I really have been thinking about this. So in our church, we have every 6 months we have a conference, and it's where the top leadership in the church will speak to all the members of the church across the world. And it's really an impressive event, and there's some great teaching and learning that goes on. In one of the sessions that we were listening to yesterday, the main leader of our church shared a story about his youth, which is kind of unusual for this particular individual. He's not been super emotional over the years, but this was a little different. And he shared about, I think he said he was 7 years old, I want to say, and his dad had died. And he was upset and really struggling. And his grandpa stepped in and said, I will be your dad. I will fill that role for you. I'll be there for you. And I think that we don't always understand and know what life is going to bring. And if we start cutting out some of the people that could play the most profound role in the lives of our children, just over differences of opinion or things like that, we might be missing an opportunity for our children to have somebody else to connect to relate to, and to get information from, to get guidance from, mentoring from. Now, of course, if the parents have been abusive or inappropriate or things like that, I get that. That's a different story. We're not talking about that. We're talking about maintaining relationships, even though we might have a different view of things or a different way of doing things, because we want that influence in our children's lives. And we want our children to influence the lives of our parents. Mm-hmm. And there's just a ton of value there. And so we're going to get into that today. We're going to discuss some of those things and what's happening, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
I think that the answer to that might be that grandparents or coaches or teachers or leaders that have that influence over our children just have the opportunity to connect with them, because they don't listen to everybody. They don't listen to all adults, right? But there's certain ones that they do. And if I think of those instances, it's because they've had a relationship and they've connected with them. So as frustrating as that might be as parents, if that bothers us, then let's look at our connection and the relationship we have. And also just be okay and understand you'll have your time one day. You'll get to be the grandma. I'm here to say it's the best thing ever, but you get to have that influence over people, and just know that it's normal and natural, because it's easy to get upset about that. Like, I'm telling you, and you don't seem to care or listen, but somebody else. But I think just if we changed our thought to, that's so great, we have people that love and care about my children that are able to help them at this time in a way that I can't.
I really love that thought. And I've shared this before a couple of times, but it's worth sharing again in this instant. A time when I was in a really dark place in high school, and my mom, in desperation, called out to another adult because she couldn't get through to me. And so she called out to a church leader who was able to get through and help me. And, I've always appreciated my mom being willing to do that, being willing to put aside her thoughts and feelings to get me the help that I needed. So I appreciate that shift of the mind frame of, hey, thankfully I have somebody who cares enough about my child and has a good enough connection that that my child is getting what they need and is going to ultimately get what's best for them.
I heard this statistic, I would guess that's what you would call it. I hope I have it right. But it said that teens need 5 influence people in their life.
Mm.
So the more we can have like grandparents, leaders, teachers that are having a positive influence on our children, if they need 5, then yeah, let's open that up. Let's be accepting and thankful to those people that are willing to have that influence for our children in the way that we want.
Well, it's just like Liz said, right? Like mom couldn't get through to you, but somebody else could, a different adult could, that could be trusted. And of course, as parents, man, you proceed with caution when we start inviting others and their influence into the lives of our children. Proceed with caution, but also be open and aware of the opportunities to have others, whether it's a coach or a teacher or a trusted friend or a religious leader or especially grandparents. Like that influence can be so powerful. And as a parent, there have been times that I have been so deeply grateful for other adults and their influence in my children's lives. And I've been able to step back and just allow them to have that appropriate relationship with other adults to influence them in ways that maybe I can't reach at that time.
Yeah. And, I love the idea of a grandparent playing a big role in the lives of our children. So I realize that not every situation works out for you to be in close contact with your parents, right? So, example, my parents live in Washington. So they are not nearly as involved in my children's lives as, say, my mother-in-law who lives in state with us, right? But there's still room for connection and my parents do still they do still interact, call, talk, right, all those things with their grandkids. And I also recognize that intergenerational living doesn't always work out for some. In fact, for many, it may not be ideal. But we had such a wonderful experience having Curtis's dad live with us. And he lived with us for about 3 years. And we all absolutely loved it. And I recognize, again, that may not be the case for everybody. Somebody may be thinking of their father-in-law or maybe their mother-in-law and thinking, whew, man, there's no way I could do that. And that's
okay. Yeah, don't worry
Yes.
about that.
Yes, it really is okay. And in fact, it didn't go so well when I did live with my mother-in-law for 6 months. It wasn't such a great thing. But the influence that Bill had on our kids was absolutely fantastic. And we really loved it. And we really cherished him living with us at that time. And I think it's important to note too, so most people know that I'm deeply religious, and Bill he believes in God, but his beliefs are very different than ours. And that wasn't a source of conflict or contention, and a lot of it is because we set boundaries early on, and he was perfectly comfortable and willing to abide by those boundaries. And we obviously respected his boundaries as well. But I'm thinking back to what Jeremiah said about, don't cut your parents out or don't cut people out just because they don't live the way they do. Don't let something like religion be a barrier if everybody's mutually respectful, right? I mean, if Bill was doing things like trying to sway our kids away from our religion or something like that, okay, obviously that's going to be a really big problem. But if your parents are willing to be respectful of your religious beliefs and are, being and willing to let you kind of set the boundaries in terms of religion, still let your parents be a part of your kids' lives. I mean, we absolutely loved, again, it was fantastic having Bill here and him being so involved with his grandkids.
Yeah, and everybody's going to have a different experience. As I've been thinking about this episode, I, of course, went back to my childhood and the role my grandparents played in my life, when they were still here on the earth. It was so profound for me. If I look at my grandparents on my dad's side, my dad's dad passed before my dad was even born. Mm-hmm. So I never met him, but my dad's grandmother, I only met her a few times. And like I still vividly remember getting ice cream at grandma's house. And I remember visiting her the last time I saw her in the hospital, and the kind and gentle words she shared with me that touched me in a way that nobody else could have. She was such a sweet and kind individual. And I think about my mom's parents and the role that they played. And my grandpa, he was a lot of fun. And we loved to be with him and do things with him. My grandmother was actually kind of difficult, and there wasn't a lot of affection from her. It wasn't like, hey, give me hugs and kisses and I love yous. But sometimes it was pretty stern responses. But there was so much I learned from that. And then as I got older, when I was a teenager, that grandmother was very sick. My father had passed some years previous, and I started having to take care of grandma and bring wood in the house for fires to keep her warm and take care of her yard and help take her to the store or whatever she needed, right? There was a lot of things that we had to do for her. And I got put in this place as a teenager that had a driver's license, that I was often expected to go to grandma's house and take care of things several times a week. I was there. And what that did for me is it provided me opportunity to connect with my grandmother. And I may have had a very different perspective of her had I not had that opportunity, just based on my childhood with her. And she would share stories with me and teach me things about my mom and about her experiences. And they went through some hard stuff, especially during the Depression and the struggles that were there. But I got to connect with her in a way that I cherish today. And I absolutely loved that woman, and I was so grateful for the time we were able to spend together. And it shaped me. It molded me. It gave me a greater desire to make sure that my kids have opportunities to care for others especially when they're aging. I just think that there's a ton of value in that. But if we destroy the connection, or we don't allow the connection to happen over silly differences, and I realize they may not seem silly to you, but over differences that maybe could be avoided, we lose the opportunity for our kids to have some experiences that will be profound for them in their lives. And I don't want my kids to miss out on that. And hopefully those listening can maybe evaluate what those relationships look like for them and their families, and how they could improve those or be more open if there is a struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. To this day, I'm fortunate to have one set of grandparents that is still alive. Both of my mom's parents have passed on, and even with my grandma on my mom's side, I never met my grandpa on my mom's side. But even on my mom's side, what I remember most is, and she got sick and with Alzheimer's when I was a teenager. And before that, we didn't have a ton of close contact because she lives in a different state. But what I do remember about my grandma was just chocolate. She's always giving us chocolates. And it's just a very fond memory. I can't eat a Hershey's bar without thinking of my grandma on my mom's side. And even to this day, I love, love, love spending time with my grandparents, even now as an adult. And so, I'm grateful for my parents helping to cultivate that relationship. And I hope that, my kids will continue to want their grandparents involved in their lives. And so, yeah, because one of the things that teens will often do is they will naturally look beyond parents for validation and guidance. And so, again, just don't discount the positive influence that grandparents can have in terms of just helping pass on important values, helping build emotional connection, and just helping teens understand the importance of community. Because the reality is everybody in life is going to go through hard things, and you want to network. You need support people. You need people that you can turn to in times of struggle and say, hey, I just need a listening ear, or man, I could really use help with this. Can you help me out with this? Can you give me advice, or can you just listen to me? Grandparents, extended family, those are great, great avenues for teens to be able to turn to if maybe they are feeling less comfortable talking to mom and dad about something, right? Like, help your kid identify who's a safe person you can talk to. Grandma, grandpa, perfect. That's a great option.
Yeah, I appreciate thinking of grandparents and what some of the things you were saying, Liz, remind me that I think it maybe as parents, we set that role of the importance of parents or other people influence in our life. I think of my own maternal grandma, and she has passed. And as an adult, I miss my conversations with her. As an adult, I would call her and talk to her frequently. And I love those conversations with her. And I try to think like, why did I take the time to call her? Because life is busy. But she always made me feel important, my kids important, and wanted to know, and was like, I guess like maybe like my biggest cheerleader, just thought what we were doing was so exciting and wanting to know those things. And so I see that value that I had that relationship and that influence in my life with her and excited to tell her things. So then I think it's important to me for my children, and I see the importance of it. And I love when they want to call their grandparents or tell them or be excited, or when grandparents call to be excited about the things that they're involved in and accomplished. And maybe that comes just the modeling of your experience, and then you want that for your children. Maybe that influences that or wants that. But I guess I saw that importance of having somebody that I felt like was excited about what was going on in my life and wanted to talk to them about it. So I see that importance for my own children of having that opportunity or those people in their life too.
I love what you've shared, Selina. I think going back to what Liz was talking about and that role that they can play where sometimes our kids are just more comfortable talking to somebody else besides mom and dad. You know, if we've cultivated those relationships with grandparents, it's just one more adult. I guess I think about like a teenager going through something difficult, maybe, you know, bullying at school, or maybe they made a poor choice that they're struggling with, that they're not wanting to talk to mom and dad about. Man, isn't it nice to know that, hey, we've got 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 other adults that we're comfortable with them talking to, and they could have somebody to share that with and somebody to give them some direction, advice, or give them coaching or mentoring to help them through those struggles. That's one of the primary reasons to have them in that role. And of course, the other lessons that we've all learned through our grandparents and the things that we experience with them. But having more people to influence our kids is not a bad thing. I realize we live in a crazy world. I realize that we want to be extra cautious about who we give access to our children, but we've got to find those that we can. Doing it alone, I guess I don't see that as a reality. Parenting kids, that is, like all alone, or just mom and dad. Yeah, you can, but and you can be successful, but man, it's so helpful to see your son walking down the hall with another adult man that you trust and just sharing life stories with them and being able to just turn away and say, yeah, go do it. Go have that experience. Go have that relationship, because it's going to shape them, and it's going to shape them in good ways.
I also think about how legacy, grandparents, heritage, just generations, how that helps you to see value and see who you are and see purpose. You're part of a bigger picture, a bigger story. I heard a story about a young man who was troubled and getting in trouble with the law, and his parents just like they were at a loss. They couldn't get him to understand the importance of the choices he was making. And for some reason, for whatever reason it happened to, he ended up reading a story about his grandpa. And he knew his grandpa as this like strong, successful man. But the story was about his teenage years. And in his teenage years, he was struggling just the same trouble with the law. And he shared his stories of his challenges and then how he was able to turn his life around. And this young man, it influenced him so much to know that his grandpa, who he knew as a whole different person, had struggled just like he did, because in his opinion, he was at a loss and his parents didn't know what to do and he was just a lost cause. But seeing his grandpa and where he was helped motivate and helped him change to be a better person and change his life, and had that influence because he knew who his grandpa was now, and he felt that his grandpa had that connection with him and could help him through these challenges. that he was experiencing. To me, that's just amazing to know you're a part of a bigger picture. You're loved and cared for. You're important before and after, like before you and after you, and how much value that gives to you and your identity of who you are.
Thanks for sharing that story, Selina. I was also thinking about other adults, and sometimes that's aunts and uncles and the role that they play. You know, I've got a sister who is just an amazing woman, and I don't feel like we always had the greatest relationship. But when I see her now, on the rare occasion she gets to interact with my children, I'm grateful for her perspectives and for her communication. Every time we can add another trusted adult to the relationship with the child, that's just one more person that they feel cared about from and loved and influenced by, versus a child feeling all alone. You know, as parents, of course, we love our kids, but they don't always feel that love from us. And when they're going through something hard, maybe it's an aunt that can wrap their arms around them and just help them feel loved. And so we can kind of reduce some of these feelings of isolation that occurs. But we've got to cultivate the relationships. We can't just let them go by.
Yeah, absolutely. And with relationships can sometimes bring tension. So to kind of wrap up, we'll discuss that a little bit of challenges when grandparents or other adults maybe disagree with parenting approaches. And I think, so my philosophy is for the most part, parents have the right, the obligation, the responsibility to set the boundaries, the rules, the expectation. That's their primary job. And, for the most part, I think grandparents they do a great service to the whole family when they respect and accept those boundaries. But it doesn't mean that maybe there's not going to be a little bit of tension there or some disagreement. And it can be any number of things, but I do think it is important to address. And so in these instances, I think the number one thing is if it's something big, maybe shield your child from it, right? So don't have like big arguments or big disagreements about parenting in front of kids, right? If it's a small thing, then I think that's a great opportunity for kids to see conflict resolution in action. So again, it's going to be different. It's going to be unique. It's going to depend on the situation, but conflict does not have to mean the end of a relationship, right? So learn good conflict resolution between parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles.
Well, you're modeling the behavior for your children, right? And yeah, we probably shouldn't talk about, disagreements in parenting styles, but it's okay if your children see you have conflict with your parents, their grandparents, and how you resolve that, right? And again, this just gets back to so many of the communication styles that we've talked about here on the podcast, and seeking to understand them, setting appropriate boundaries. And I think that a big thing for grandparents is just acknowledging, like, look, I know how much you love them. I know how important they are to you. I know you're just trying to help and be helpful, but this is what we'd like to do in our home. Can you support us in that? And, like helping them understand how important their relationship is to you with their children. Like, man, Dad, I love that you have such a great relationship with my daughter, and it's so important to her and it's important to me. And I want that to keep going. And I want you to cultivate that relationship. And can we make sure that we're on the same page together for the future? It'll just kind of melt those struggles away and be able to find the solution most of the time. Maybe you're going to have a stubborn parent, and maybe you're going to have to set some boundaries and whatnot. But I think in most cases, we're going to find that there are solutions available, and it may not be easy. There might be some hard roads in front of you. And like you experienced, Liz, with your father-in-law, who's maybe got some different views on religion than what you want your kids to learn. Like the reality is your kids are going to learn other views from the world. Maybe it might be best coming from someone that you love, that they learn some of those other views. I have a grandmother that really struggled with my parents' religious choices, and I learned a lot from her and her views, and the way she talked about her views was really important to me. And it was quite different than what my parents shared, but it helped me to become more independent in my thinking and my way of doing things, instead of just following along with mom and dad, which in the end really strengthened me as an individual. So I don't know if I'd be too afraid of that with your kids, as long as we come to an understanding together.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, neither one of Curtis's parents are in the same faith as us. And so, they do things differently. They observe religion differently. And it has been a really great teaching opportunity for our kids to say, we love and we respect everybody. So a really good one is a quirk about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is we don't drink coffee. Well, Curtis's dad was a coffee drinker. And that was a great opportunity to say, hey, we respect Grandpa. We love having him in our home. We choose not to drink coffee, but we don't judge Grandpa for his decision to drink coffee, and we don't treat him differently. That is such a great teaching opportunity for kids to help them to see differences don't mean that you can't get along, right? Differences, you can absolutely 100% have differences and still be really good friends and still have loving, good relationships with people.
Yeah, I think when we come at it together with the perspective of that we both love this child, this teenager, this child, however, that we both love them. We want what's best for them. What does that look like? How can we make it the best situation?
Yep.
One final thought from me on this topic of addressing challenges or conflicts within the relationship is I did say that we're modeling for our children. And if we choose to cut our parents off because we can't come to an agreement on the way this looks, or because we're unhappy about, something that they did, we're modeling that for our children. Mm-hmm. And if you want to continue to have a relationship with your children, probably the best way to ensure that doesn't happen is to model that not happening in your life, if that makes sense for our listeners. So if you're going to cut off your parents, I would expect a child or two to cut you off. It's just the way things are going to work. Our children follow our actions 1,000% more than they follow what we tell them. So if we tell them it's not good and then we do it anyway, they're probably going to do what we're doing. And I could be totally wrong there. And for some of you, I sure hope I am. But everything we do is a model for our children and what they're going to experience and what they're going to do and choose. So do with that what you will, but I would exercise caution before we just start cutting off relationships because we don't see eye to eye.
I agree. And I also do want to say that there are instances where it is 100% appropriate to cut off contact with parents. So if there is an instance of, abuse of any type going on, or, those situations are rare though. But, if it comes to the safety of your child and your parent is consistently doing something that is going to endanger your child, then yeah, there may need to be some more intense boundaries, but I really genuinely believe that is the exception, not the rule. And it's pretty rare.
Yeah. We're not talking about, I just can't get along, or we have a difference in opinion in parenting styles, or you shouldn't let them do this, but you let them do that.
Yep.
That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about these extreme cases of abuse and harm or neglect or things of that nature. Very, very different story for sure.
Yes.
So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. Okay. So next week is going to be a continuation of relationships with adult children. Last time we discussed this topic, we mostly focused on launching your adult children and setting the boundaries there. So we want to expand on that and move past that of maybe your child is established in the world, maybe they're getting married, and what the boundaries are going to be like there. So we will see you all next week. Have a question? How about a topic you'd like us to cover? Send us an email at mentalhealthpod21@gmail.com.